What is up, guys? For Real Bass Beaters here, bringing you my first ever YouTube video. In this video, we're going to be doing a review on the SLX DC70. I've gotten probably 2 or 3 months of using this, and I think it's about time that we do a review. A lot of people are asking questions. How does it compare to the regular American SLX DC? Let's get right into the video. Okay, guys, let's get right into the review. So right here is the SLX DC70. This thing comes in a very different paint job compared to the regular SLX DC. As you can see, you have a gray paint job compared to the black with the more blue accents. A lot of people are annoyed. We're annoyed by these the blue letters here, so they've made it gray on black. I personally think both look great. I like the DC70 paint job a little bit more. But let's get into the cosmetic differences first. So, of course, you've got the black paint job. And then if you look at the end knobs on the DC70 are a little bit different. They're kind of this shiny silver compared to the regular SLX DC, which has those Corrado knobs. Next up, obviously, we have the smaller 70 size spool. Now, that spool is going to allow for a lot better casting. Just a lot of different things that you would expect from a 70 size spool. Longer distance, better skipping, more control, all that good stuff. So this is a 70 size spool compared to the SLX DC American version, which is a 150 size spool. Now, the DC70 comes in 3 different gear ratios. You've got the regular gear ratio, the high gear ratio, and the XG. Right here, we've got a high gear ratio. I also have an extra high gear, and the high gear is a 7:2:1, so that means for every 1 turn of the handle that you do, the spool is going to turn 7.2 times. The XG, I believe, is 8.2:1, and the regular is 6.3:1. I'm pretty sure the gear ratios are just about the same for the SLX American version and the Japanese version. Okay, next up, we've got gearing. We've got KGN Hagine body with, obviously the regular SLX DC gearing in it. So it's not micro module. It's the KGN gearing. It's very smooth out of the box, but I've noticed after a little bit of wear and tear, I've used the regular SLX DC for about a year now. And after probably about a year of just heavy use, the gearing it feels a little bit geary after a little bit. Not very noticeable, but that's just something to note because you don't have micro module gearing with that very tiny teething on those gears. It's not as smooth, but personally, I don't really think it makes that big of a difference. It doesn't really impede your performance. It's really just a feel. Next up, we've got the DC braking itself. The DC braking itself is just like the SLX DC American model or the Corrado DC. All these 3 reels have the same exact DC4 braking, which is where you have a setting for 1. If you look at this, you have 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? And so 4 is going to be your highest braking for like skipping, stuff like that, high wind situations. 3, I believe they call it their fluorocarbon mode, although if you get your reel dialed in, you can use it for just about anything. You can use 2 with fluoro if you get your reel dialed in. 2 they label as their braid and monofilament mode, and 1 is their extra long distance casting. Now, if we open this up, you've got a little switch right on the bottom here, just like the American version, and the side plate should twist off like that. If we pull that off, obviously you've got the regular DC internal side plate, and you've got the DC spool. And so what the DC braking does is it's going to check your spool speed. I believe they say it checks your spool speed about 1,000 times a second, and it does little electronic adjustments to adjust your braking, prevent bird's nest, prevent overruns mid-cast. In my experience with DC, it's just really amazing. You can bomb cast straight into the wind, and you get absolutely no overrun, no bird's nest. It just casts perfectly. That's why I love DC braking. You really don't have to worry about a thing. If you get it really dialed in, it's almost unbeatable. Although if you use, say, like an MGL or even a regular reel and get it dialed in, it'll work just as good. It's just a little bit simpler with the DC because you have that 1, 2, 3, 4 braking compared to, say, a regular reel, which will have centrifugal braking or magnetic braking, where there's a lot more adjustments that you can do. This one is very quick and simple. That's something I love about the DC braking. Next up, let's talk a little bit about the 70 size spool. So in my experience, you do get a little bit more casting distance out of the 70 compared to the 150. We're going to do an on the water casting video in the future. You can, if you look at these two spools side by side, you can easily tell the difference. The regular American version is definitely a lot wider. It's going to hold a lot more line. So for things like, I'd say, like frogging or deep cranking, where you're going to need a lot more line, I'd probably go with the American version. Whereas things like, I don't know, maybe a Texas rig or jigs, stuff along those lines, where you're not going to need a huge spool, that's probably where you're going to want to use the 70. Now, price wise, the American SLX DC is going to go for around $190, while the Japanese version is going to be a bit more expensive. It can go from anywhere between, I want to say, $190 and $220, depending on which website you use. Obviously, the SLX DC70 is a Japanese reel, so you do have to ship it overseas. So shipping typically costs between $20 and $30 if you're shipping from Japan to the US. I'm not sure how it is for other areas, but I'd assume it's probably around the same price. So you do have to tack that on. So if you include shipping, it's probably gonna end up being around, I want to say, $210 to like $230 or $240 for paying for this reel as a whole. Although if you do buy multiple Japanese reels or other Japanese products, the shipping is all going to be bunched together. So when I bought my SLX DC70s, I got 3 of them, and the shipping was one flat cost. It was like 20 or 30 bucks, and I got all of them shipped for the same price. So if you're gonna get them shipped overseas, and if you're interested in any other Japanese reels like the Scorpion DC, the Scorpion MGL, Japan has a lot of different reels that are not offered on the American market. So if you're gonna buy one of just the SLX DC, do take that into consideration. But in my opinion, you do get way more casting distance out of this 70 size spool. Now, moving on from the 70 size spool, we can talk a little bit about the drag. The drag is about the same. You get, I think, 12 pounds of drag out of this drag star. It's a clicky drag star, and I think that's the same amount as the SLX DC American version, which is also 12 pounds of drag. In summary, what the differences are is you have a different paint job. The DC braking is exactly the same. The spool size is different, so you have 70 versus 150. The handlebars, the handle knobs are a little bit different. The SLX American version is going to be a little bit fatter of a knob compared to kind of a thinner knob of the Japanese version. And that's about it. I talked about just about everything that I could talk about. We're going to be doing some on-the-water testing with both these reels, casting the same lures on the same rod to really get a feel of the difference between these two reels in the future. So if you guys like the video, make sure you smash that like button. It helps out the channel a lot. If you're new to the channel, feel free to subscribe. It'll really encourage me to make more videos like these. I'm going to do more comparison videos, more reviews like this in the future. And once things start to warm up, I'm going to be taking you guys out on the water, doing pond hopping videos, Google Maps challenges, MTB challenges, a ton of other different awesome stuff. So make sure you guys subscribe to the channel, smash the like button. If you guys have any questions, leave them in the comments. Hope you guys have an amazing rest of your day. Peace.